born in 1923 on February 20th in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My maiden name was Helen May with an E, Murray, and in school, college, I didn't have a nickname until I went to college. It was Murph, spelled M-U-R-F. Most of the family that I have call me Mom or Grandmother, Grandma, or Grandma Helen, but Al always called me Helen. May Piper, those are my May and Nellie Piper were my aunts, and my mother was Daisy. I don't know much about Aunt May. She was married to Uncle George, who was a streetcar operator in Pittsburgh with the hills going up and down. I don't know if I should tell you this, but Aunt Nellie married the town drunk, Uncle Cease. And we didn't have very much to do with him. No, I have no memory whatsoever about John Piper, my grandfather. He was, they tell stories about him when he was, he took his daughters away from the area, and I never met him. Oh, Margaret Murray was my stepmother. My mother, Daisy Piper, died when I was 6. I have a story to tell about her death. The soles of her feet were scratched by a pin by these 3 frock-coated, black-hatted doctors standing at the foot of her bed. And Al told me, Al, my husband, told me, he taught at medical school, that when people were dying or after they were first born, they had something called the Babinski reflex. He said the toes of infants and those who are about to die were bent up or bent backwards, but that was the Babinski reflex. And I remember standing at the foot of the bed with this little kid, and they scratched the bottom of my mother's foot, and I said, "You can't do that to my mother," just before she died. All of my cousins were in the Pittsburgh area, except my dad moved to Youngstown and Ohio. And there were Murray and Donald Lake, and Murray was a character, and Donald, he was a cousin. There were Catherine and Peggy Murray, my Uncle Bill's daughters, and Catherine moved to Florida when my dad moved to Florida, so they were very close. There were Eddie and Leah Murray, Uncle Arch's daughters. And Leah is the only one left, and she lives in Laramie, Wyoming, and calls me every once in a while. She's older than I am. She's 95. Uncle Babe never had any children. I think probably my favorite cousin was Nellie. Nellie was Nellie Maxwell, who was Aunt Agnes's and Uncle Earl's adopted daughter. Oh, Grandfather Murray? Oh, he was strict. He was charming. He was generous. He was my dad. He was a great man. He used to be a coal salesman. Big train loads of coal sold to dealers who then sold it to pieces of it to people who had coal furnaces, and we all had coal furnaces. And I used to ride along with him when he went calling on the coal dealers, and I was very proud of him. I liked that very much. Alfonso Scorazzo was one of his customers, and many people had good things to say about him. Childhood memory was when my mother, who played the piano. I was pretty smart, I think, for a child of my age, but I was 5 years old, and she was teaching me to play the piano, and I was playing, and she said, "My, you do that piece very well." And I said, "Well, the little numbers on the top of the notes tell me which finger to use." And she got mad. That was cheating. Oh, I have a bunch of serendipity stories to tell you. I interviewed with the Coppers Company. I went to the College of Worcester, and I went to interviewed with the Coppers Company, and they told me how to the creosote formula for fence posts in the farms of southern Ohio was what I was would be testing, and I didn't like that. I was offered I applied for a research scholarship in Pittsburgh at the Carnegie Mellon Institute, and I figured I could stay with my aunts and save money if I did that. But a third thing was I interviewed at Miles Laboratories, and they offered me a job as a chemist in the control laboratory. And I decided no way was I doing creosotes, and I hadn't heard from the research fellowship from Carnegie Mellon, and so I accepted a job at Miles Laboratories in the control laboratory. And 2 weeks after I had moved to Elkhart, my parents forwarded to me a letter offering me the research fellowship. My husband's name is Alfred H. Free, PhD. I got bored with working in a control laboratory because once you develop a method, you just do the same thing day after day. And so my boss, who is Lloyd Johnson, arranged for me to interview with some guy from Cleveland, Western Reserve University biochemistry lab. He was starting up a biochemistry lab in the research department at Miles. And I interviewed, and he hired me, and 2 years later I married the boss. Well, we planted pine trees, and we had a spade which had a slit in the ground, and those little seedlings were placed in the slit in the ground and stamped all around, and we did it for hours and hours and hours, and rows and rows and rows, right close to Bristol. And Bristol had a volunteer fire department, and one time when we were burning it off, it spread beyond our control, and Al said, "Take the truck and go." We had no cell phones, we had nothing to communicate with. Take the truck and run into Bristol, and the volunteer knock on the door of the fire station and have the volunteer firemen come out and take care of this fire. So I hopped in the truck with the youngest kids and drove into the fire department and knocked on the door, and the fire and I said, he says, "Where is this farm?" And I said, "Well, I'll take you there." But in the meantime, the volunteers were running down, driving down the road, and the volunteers were each driving their own cars, and I was waiting for the fire truck to, but they kept, you know, I had to lead them to the farm, but they were all in their cars and urging me to go on. But it was a grass fire, no problem. First of all, we're an older congregation, and believe me, we are an old congregation, and that's part of our problem. We have a bridge service, which is a drums and guitars and stuff like that, but we have become old and stayed in our ways. I worry about it sometimes. I went to the College of Worcester in 1941, expecting to be an English and Latin teacher. And then in December 1941 was Pearl Harbor. And the fellows, unless they were going to be a physician or a preacher, left in droves from the campus because they were trying to avoid the draft. and the foot soldier thing was not the best, and they joined the Air Force, then the Navy, and the house mother at dinner one time said, you know, we girls have got to step up and do science. And she said, you're taking chemistry, aren't you, Helen? And I said, yeah. Get good grades? I got all A's. And she said, why don't you switch? And I said, okay. just boing, like that. And there's a sequel to that. I have given thousands of talks to local section of the American Chemical Society, or to women's groups, or to kids groups. And one time I was at Dartmouth, and I gave a talk, and my talk was videotaped. And the person who ran the video, young woman, and who was a graduate student, came down to me afterwards, and she said, you know, my mother worked at Worcester, and does the name Harriet Klein ring a bell? And I said, she was the one who got me interested in chemistry. And isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? And she was a chemist too. That's the sequel to the story. Well, the contributions I have made to make the world a better place can be summarized by the fact that, you know, Bayer bought Miles Laboratories, and Bayer is making the 150th anniversary celebration, and they're going to write a book, and I'm in it. The author of the book and the photographer from Germany came into Elkhart and interviewed me and took pictures and all this kind of jazz. Miles Lab, right across the street, the restaurant, has all these old pictures on the walls. They have billed me as the grande dame of the diagnostics industry. and I love it. The author said, come over and to Miles Lab and bring your Kindle. I said, why do you want my Kindle? He said, ma'am, most people your age don't even know what a Kindle is. and that made me feel good. Oh yeah, this was the double sequential. The experiment I found to be the most memorable was the double sequential enzymatic reaction for glucose in urine and blood, which was the basis of the home test for diabetes. The basic patent, there's double sequential enzymatic reaction as ALS, and my contribution was to stabilize the color and to stabilize the reactants. And we have patents. Each of us has a separate patent on this particular reagent strip, and that's most memorable because that's what started. It was the first urine test, and it was the first blood test, and it led to the multiple tests, and for the epitome of urinalysis is 10 different reactions. There's glucose, there's ketones, there's bilirubin, there's urobilinogen, there's protein, there's specific gravity and pH and leukocytes and nitrite, and I'm not sure what the other one is, but all these reagents are on one dip and read strip, and you dip it into the urine and match it to the color chart, and that gives you 10 different answers in 2 minutes. Some of the most renowned chemists whom I personally know include a bunch of people whom I have, well, first of all, let me tell you, I have endowed a lectureship at the College of Worcester for the chemistry department. And Mary Good was the first person I invited to give this lecture. Mary was the second woman president. I was the third of the American Chemical Society. She has a wonderful career in academics and industry and government. She has been the Undersecretary of Commerce for Bill Clinton. She has been the Vice President for Technology for the Allied Signal Corporation. She started off in academics as a professor and became a Boyd Professor of Chemistry at the University of New Orleans. And she has, we talk about government, industry, and academics as the three possible careers for chemists, and she has excelled in all of them. Jackie Barton is one of the years she'll win the Nobel Prize, I think, because she's another one of the chemists invited to Worcester. But she you know what nanoparticles are? Nanogram things. Nanos are a nanometer is a billionth of a meter, and for instance, Shaq O'Neal is more than 2 billion nanometers high. Anyway, she talks about nanotechnology, and she has this idea of the reason for DNA misbehaving are these nanoparticles of broken molecules. She's fantastic, and I have met and interacted with several possibilities for, I think, Nobel laureates. The favorite thing about chemistry that I enjoyed most was you couldn't tell what's going to happen. Einstein always said, if we knew what was going to happen, we wouldn't call it research. And that's in a nutshell. because you never know what you're going to find. Well, for one thing, the women's role in the workplace has changed so that you don't have to quit when you're 6 months pregnant. Eric was the biggest premature baby in the world. Because you don't talk about things. The women have the place in the work, the position in the workplace has changed for women in many many aspects, but we're still not salary-wise, promotion-wise, equal to what's available to men. More women are working for the PhD in chemistry than men are, but the salaries aren't equal and promotions aren't equal. So there still has a way to go. I can see only advantages for being married to my boss for so long. I let the disadvantages disappear. One of the best early day memories were when we were doing metabolism studies, and Eric and Penny were fans of Batman, and we would have to go back to the laboratory and feed the rats some stuff, metabolic stuff, and the kids would take the rats out of the individual cages, and we would give them the tube directly into the stomach, and they would put them back in the cages. But I had visions of Eric and Penny sitting on the floor of the lab, taking a rat by its shoulders and saying, "Da da 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 da, rat man, da 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 da, rat man." Oh dear, I can't think of any worst because I blotted them all out of my mind. The biggest challenge was time. I had help, thank goodness, because we had Amish gals stay with us during the time the kids were little, but they lived here from Monday through Friday, and they were a godsend. I don't know how people who couldn't afford full-time help managed. Well, Latin was to me a not a it was a live language, not a dead language, and I don't remember much about my favorite myths, but one of the letter from the head of the Latin department to the head of the chemistry department was interesting because, first of all, his name, the head of the Latin department was called Virgil Hyatt, and he had to be a Latin professor, but he said to the in his letter to Dr. Grady, who was head of the chemistry department, he said, "Why this girl wants to give up the marvelous world of mythology to work in a smelly old lab, I cannot understand." Japan and the Orient. I've fallen maybe because Japan is my favorite is because we had a branch in Japan of the Ames Company, and so we knew people and had this connection to the guys. I learned to play golf, I think, just playing golf with Al, and I wasn't very good. I'm still not very good, but I still play Wednesday mornings at Old Orchard. We used to have tennis tournaments, family tennis tournaments. We had so many people that we had doubles, singles, tennis. Al taught me how to drive, and his blood pressure rose, I guess. I didn't have any idea how to drive with stick shifts, and he taught the kids to drive too. And he didn't teach them to drive on gravel roads in Elkhart County. He did the Dan Ryan in Chicago. And the girls say, "I was never so frightened in my life." Well, I played Vera, the lead in 10 Little Indians, the old Agatha Christie mystery. I loved acting, and I wasn't very good looking, but I had a lot of character. I don't know how I ever did it. But I with the Elkhart Civic Theater, I was the secretary and went to all the meetings. I was active in Tri Kappa, and I had charge of one of the Tri Kappa Follies, which was the vaudeville show that they all contributed to. And one year I asked the Ames Company to donate money to support the show, and Bob Baldwin said, "Oh, okay, if you are the representative on stage." And at that time there were the multiple reagent strips, but we had bookmarks maybe an inch wide, and made of plastics and with all these stripes on it. And I had a headdress with wiggles, and Bonnie, my daughter Bonnie, says she's been looking for all of her life to get a picture of me in this fancy thing with lace stockings but she finally had one drawn for me because I promised the guys in advertising that would, and I know I never appeared in shorts that short. The wisdom I don't know that it's wisdom I would like to pass on to generations of my family, but I would urge them to take science. I would urge them to pay attention to technology. I would urge them to, and I don't care if they turn out to be scientists or not, but just the basic information that you get from science is important to have. And I've been to every grandchild's school several times and doing experiments with them and having them recognize what a joy it is to be a scientist. Go for it. The helpful advice that I would give to young women would be to not be afraid of science, and to pursue a career in some kind of job that requires science, because I think that a scientific approach to any kind of a problem is important to recognize. Cabernet. Merlot is my first favorite. I don't know why I like Merlot, but I do. I feel that religion and science are complementary to each other. My daughter Nina has supplied me with little books of devotions. Our small group at church supplies me with books about, and I see no problem whatsoever that science and religion can interact side by side. I should tell you about the American Chemical Society counselor who got me to come and talk to Austin, Texas, at the university there. The Girl Scouts were having a support group for girls who were diabetic, and they were forming this, and one of the mothers got up after I had given my speech and said, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for my girl's life. Her father was a diabetic, and she had inherited type 1 diabetes, and she couldn't have lived without our products. Cheryl drove me to Austin, Texas, and she says there wasn't a dry eye in the place. I was born in 1923 on February 20th in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I went to the College of Worcester in 1941 expecting to be an English and Latin teacher. And then in December 1941 was Pearl Harbor. And the fellows, unless they were going to be a physician or a preacher, left in droves from the campus because they were trying to avoid the draft. And the foot soldier thing was not the best, and they joined the Air Force, then the Navy, and the house mother at dinner one time said, you know, we girls have got to step up and do science. And she said, you're taking chemistry, aren't you, Helen? I said, yeah. Get good grades? I got all A's. And she said, why don't you switch? And I said, okay. just boing, like that. I interviewed at Miles Laboratories, and they offered me a job as the chemist in the control laboratory. I got bored with working in a control laboratory because once you develop a method, you just do the same thing day after day. And so my boss, who was Lloyd Johnson, arranged for me to interview with some guy from Cleveland, Western Reserve University, biochemistry, lab. He was starting up a biochemistry lab in the research department at Miles. I interviewed, and he hired me, and 2 years later I married the boss. My husband's name is Alfred H. Free, PhD. I can see only advantages for being married to my boss for so long. I let the disadvantages disappear. The experiment I found to be the most memorable was the double sequential enzymatic reaction for glucose in urine and blood, which was the basis of the home test for diabetes. The basic patent, there's double sequential enzymatic reaction as ALS, and my contribution was to stabilize the color and to stabilize the reactants. And we have patents. Each of us has a separate patent on this particular reagent strip, and that's most memorable because that's what started. It was the first urine test, and it was the first blood test, and it led to the multiple tests, and for the epitome of urinalysis is 10 different reactions. There's glucose, there's ketones, there's bilirubin, there's urobilinogen, there's protein, there's specific gravity and pH, and leukocytes and nitrite, and I'm not sure what the other one is, but all these reagents are on one dip and read strip, and you dip it into the urine and match it to the color chart, and that gives you 10 different answers in 2 minutes. I should tell you about the American Chemical Society counselor who got me to come and talk to Austin, Texas, at the university there. The Girl Scouts were having a support group for girls who were diabetic, and they were forming this, and one of the mothers got up after I had given my speech and said, I want to thank you for my girl's life. Her father was a diabetic, and she had inherited type 1 diabetes, and she couldn't have lived without our product.